She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull. I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes in.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another Coffee and Crime Time, which is just a continuation of the past two videos we've done on the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow saga. Today we're specifically going to be focusing on the interviews that Ian and Melani Pawlowski did with Nate Eaton of East Idaho News. Their lawyers are there with them, even though you don't always see them in the frame the whole time, and they're a little over 20 minutes each, so I'd say a little under 30 minutes each, actually. So obviously we can't watch the whole thing here, we can't address the whole thing here, but there are parts of this interview that I definitely want to address. So Nate Eaton starts off by asking Melani and Ian what their reaction to the news of Alex's autopsy results is.
All right, well, the first thing I want to start with, Melani and Ian, is your reaction to the autopsy results, which came out just the other day concerning your uncle, Melani. Were you guys surprised at all? What did you think when you heard the news?
Melani responds that the news was relieving, but they weren't surprised. They knew it would be natural causes, and they had no other reason to think otherwise. This was just another step to keep revealing truth.
It was relieving, but we weren't surprised. We knew that it would be natural causes. We had no reason to think anything otherwise. I think it was just a comfort, like finally, like this part is over and it's one more stepping stone to just keep revealing truth. And then, you know, the second half of the day, they open it up and say, well, it's still under investigation again. It feels like every time we get a little bit of good news, there's a little bit of drag to that too, but overall just relief and comfort to be in the right direction.
So she considers the news of Alex dying from natural causes to be good news, but the news of the police still looking into his death to be a drag to that. And to that I say, Melani, you know what the best news is we could get to find out that Tylee and JJ are safe. Autopsy results are not good news unless you expected to hear that he died from something other than natural causes and you were relieved. Now, Melani also says Ian made a bad joke, asking if they had tested for all of the invisible poisons.
I mean, you know, you see, you post truth out there and people have already made up their minds and decided. Ian made a bad joke, like, well, did they test for all the invisible poisons? Like, it's people will still think whatever speculation or rumors or whatever they want to believe, even when it's right in front of their face. And I was talking about this too. I was like, you know, when Tylee and JJ show up, you know, again, and you're here again, I don't know if people would even believe it. They'd still, you know, go on with their own, you know, still a cult. It's still, they've done something bad, and a lot of people have already made up their minds, and we just want to come on and share what we do know and share truth, and hopefully we, you know, keep getting opportunities where people will be open to that.
It's not really a bad joke, it's a good point. There are substances that can be given to a person which won't reveal themselves during an autopsy. Not that this is what happened in Alex's case necessarily, but why are Melani and Ian so surprised that the general public has a hard time believing anything connected to Lori Vallow can be natural? She says people will make up their minds, and even if it's right there in front of their face, they will continue to believe rumors and their own speculation. Nothing is right in front of our faces, though. Melani, her aunt, her new uncle Chad, they've done everything in their power to mislead people, and many people have ended up dead or shot at who are around them. Then Melani says, when Tylee and JJ show up again and are here again, I don't know if people will even believe it. She is wrong. That's the only thing that will convince people that Lori and Chad are not involved in some nefarious end-of-days cult in which one of their core beliefs is that their loved ones can be taken over by demons, turned into zombies, and have to be taken out. That's not our fault. That's your fault. People are going to believe whatever they want. They're going to make up their minds, and then nothing else is going to convince them otherwise. You guys haven't given us anything else to convince us otherwise. And honestly, if we could just know that JJ and Tylee were safe, you guys can go be in a cult all you want, as long as it doesn't bother anyone else. I don't mind. If you guys want to have a group and you want to believe that you can cast Harry Potter spells, as long as nobody around you gets hurt. However, so many people around you have gotten hurt. So why do you think that we all need to get over this now? So Melani tells the story of how she was completely shocked by the death of Alex. She knew he hadn't been feeling well, but he was one of those tough guys who won't, put on a Band-Aid if he needs it. She and Alex were supposed to meet up so that she could bring him some of his things, and he told her he wasn't feeling well, so he couldn't meet her that day, and that's how she knew he really was ill. He told her he was having tightness of breath and trouble breathing, even from just bending down to pick up a water bottle, but when his wife Zulema told him to go to the doctor, he said no.
There was absolute shock when I got a phone call from Zulema, and she was telling me I had spoken with Alex earlier that day, and he had seemed okay, but I knew that week before he was having trouble with, he was overall a pretty healthy guy, but stubborn, wouldn't ever, put a Band-Aid on if he's bleeding everywhere. And
Melani claimed that she and Alex spoke every other day, and she'd often talk to him because she felt that he was her best friend at that point, and she could tell him anything.
And he was somebody I could kind of you could tell him anything. He's like a vault. And I was just openly telling him about, things in my new marriage, things that were, challenging, or things that were going really well. And he was just my best friend at that point. And
the last time she talked to him before he died, he told her some things that she felt compelled to write down. Now, when she's asked what he said, Melani claims he told her, Melanie, the most important thing in your marriage is to be loving, be supportive, and be patient. And he kept repeating that. He also told her everything is going to be fine. Just keep moving forward in faith. You're going to have your kids back soon.
He shared some things with me that were, I just felt like, write them down when he started talking to me. I don't know why I felt impressed to do that, but
Like what?
He said, Melanie, the most important thing in your marriage is to be loving, be supportive, and be patient. And he kept repeating that, and I was like, I need to remember that always. It always comes back to that. And it was his last words to me, and I didn't know that, but it was really just special, that I felt, hey, write that down. And he just said, everything's going to be fine. And, just keep moving forward in faith. You're going to have your kids back soon, and everything's going to work out. And just go on faith. And later that evening, I get a call from Zulema, and I think I was excited. I started telling her about my day, and then it just shifted, and Ian was there, and I kind of just went into a shock for a little bit. And then I fell to the floor, and I just felt all the feelings of losing such a close friend.
Now, I'm not sure Melani would think that advice from her Uncle Alex, a man who had been married basically 2 weeks, would be, advice about marriage that she needed to write down. But apparently she was so moved, she had to write it down. And later that evening, she got a call from Zulema that Alex was gone, and she felt the loss of a close friend, a huge loss. Melani tells us that she wasn't always close to her Uncle Alex. She had been closer to her aunt and to her other uncle, Adam. But as she began having issues in her marriage to Brandon, she could count on being able to call Alex because he was a truck driver, and she knew he'd answer and have time to talk and listen and vent. She said Alex would never put someone down or judge them. No one could do any wrong in his eyes. He was very positive and someone who was very intellectual to be around when Melani was going through a hard time. This is so contrary to really everything we know about Alex Cox. And you have all these people saying he was a good guy, the woman who was on the Dateline special, who said she, hung out with him in the stand-up comedy circuit. He was such a nice guy, so kind. Melanie's over here. He would never judge anyone. He never saw any bad in people.
He never would put somebody down or judge them. He would just say, well, here's how you handle that situation. And nobody could do any wrong in his eyes. He just was very positive, and somebody that was so influential to be around when I'm going through the hardest thing and missing my 4 children.
Yeah.
He just picked me up every day.
But he literally tased Joe Ryan, hoping to kill him. So I would really invite you, Melani, to make that make sense. You also said recently that he was so full of faith, he would stop at nothing to complete the Lord's task, whatever it was. Now, Now, Nate Eaton asks Melani and Ian to talk a little bit about themselves, how they met, how they ended up in Idaho, and then back to Arizona. Ian answers that he grew up in Southern California and he got married in 2010, moved to Idaho in 2011 with his ex-wife Natalie and their 2 kids, Max and Lily, who are now 9 and 7. He says they're fantastic kids and he misses them a lot right now. He would love to get them down to Arizona, and then he cuts off and he pivots.
With my ex-wife Natalie, we had 2 kids together. So right now they're 9 and they're 7, Max and Lily. They're fantastic kids. I miss them a lot right now, and I would love to get them down here to Arizona. But we were there with our kids. I started school at BYU Idaho. I never finished.
I'm not sure if there's some issues going on between Ian and Natalie, maybe where she isn't letting him see the kids while all of this is going on with Melani and her family. Maybe Natalie said, while you're with this woman, you are not going to be seeing your kids. And that's going to come into importance later. We're going to talk about that. Ian said he started school at Brigham Young University, but he never finished because working, going to school, being a dad, it was just too much. So he focused on, working and providing for his family. On their 9th wedding anniversary, Natalie asked for a divorce, which started in March of 2019 and wrapped up in July. Ian decided he would try to start dating, get out there and meet someone. He claims it wasn't his goal to find a wife, he just wanted to talk to new people. So he downloaded some dating apps, found Melani, and asked her out on a date that day because he doesn't do well over text since he's often sarcastic and that doesn't translate well. Now, this was November and Melani had moved to Rexburg the first week in November and was living across the street from Ian, even though they didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, the first week in November, I moved to Rexburg.
So you both were already both in the same town together.
Right.
We were across the street from each other.
Yeah, we actually found that out.
And you didn't know that.
And it's funny because I'll play it for you, but Nate Eaton says to this, "Oh, wow, okay." And it kind of sounds like he's being a little sarcastic. Sounds like Nate Eaton's throwing a little shade.
I don't even know, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Ian said everything just kind of clicked with Melani. They had similar experiences with their divorces and how the last year of their lives had gone. They understood each other, and he found her to be non-judgmental. With the previous people he dated, he felt he was making up reasons to go on a second date with them, but with Melani, it was just easy, and he didn't feel he had to do mental gymnastics to justify a second date. They spent the next 2 days talking nonstop, and they really bonded over their shared parental roles. Being a parent was very important to him, so he liked that Melani had children as well because she would understand that his kids would always come first. He says he hadn't had the opportunity to meet her children yet, but he'd brought Melani home to spend Thanksgiving with his family because she told him she didn't have anyone to spend it with, and he was so happy when she met his children, and she was so good with them. They also connected with her right away. He even goes as far as to say, "My kids immediately fell in love with her." Even his shy daughter, who was instantly attached to Melani. Ian said, quote, that his daughter wanted to take Melani around and show her everything she'd been doing, play games with her, tell her everything that's on her mind, and just seeing Melani interact with my kids just made me fall really hard, really fast for her because she's so sweet and good with them. When asked about their quick marriage, Nate says, "You got married really fast."
Right, yeah, November 30th.
November 3rd.
It was really fast. And, I was in this, battle still with my ex and didn't have my kids with us right then, but we felt both ready. We prayed about decisions together and we felt, that it was right that we should get married when we did. And, Vegas wedding wasn't dreamy or anything, but our goal was to be sealed in the temple, one day. And so we said, let's do this while we have Max and Lily. And then when we have Braxton, Brighton, Blake, and Breeze too, let's all be together when we have that special day where we can be sealed together.
And see, this just doesn't make sense to me. It might be an LDS thing or a Mormon thing, but if you want to be sealed in the temple, which is what Mormons usually want to do, I think that's what they have to do so that the marriage is considered legitimate in the LDS church. Why would you rush, when you've just known somebody 2 weeks, why would you rush and do a Vegas wedding where your own kids can't even be there? And then say, yeah, we'll just do it, when we can have a special day that we're all together. It doesn't make sense to me. Just wait, get to know each other. You're not going anywhere, either one of you, right? So wait, get to know each other, fall in love, figure out what you're like on your good days and your bad days, and then when everything's ironed out, you've got your kids, he's got his kids, have that special day where you can be sealed together in the temple according to your faith. So Nate Eaton asks about Alex and Zulema, and he wonders about a thing we've all wondered about. He asks if they had joint weddings or if it was separate. Because if you remember, Melani and Ian got married the same weekend that Alex and Zulema got married in Vegas.
Now, were Alex and Zulema married? Did you guys have a joint wedding or was that separate?
Melani responded that Alex and Zulema had been dating for several months. Alex knew he wanted to marry her and was just waiting for her to say yes. In fact, Zulema said, "I'm going to wait till I get an answer. I know I'm supposed to be with you, Alex, but I'm going to wait till it feels like the right time." According to Melani, Alex and Zulema had talked about where they wanted to get married, and it just so happened that they picked their date, and it was just a coincidence of Ian and Melani picking the day right after in the same city. It was just very convenient that Alex was there and they needed a witness.
The coincidence of us picking the day right after them wasn't planned or anything. It was just what happened, and they were there, and we had made the decision in Arizona during Thanksgiving, and we said, let's do it. And while we're there, we need a witness, and Alex and Zulema are there, and this isn't our big wedding day. This is just the beginning of our lives together, and we'll have that special moment when we're all together as a family.
I don't believe this, by the way. I don't believe any of this, but that's just my opinion. Because Nate Eaton asks, they got married the day before you? And Melani responds, yes, I believe so.
Okay, so they got married the day before you guys did.
Yes, I believe so.
So
we got married on the 30th, and I think they got married on the 29th.
I mean, what do you mean you believe so? You either know or you don't. You were there the same weekend. They were at your wedding. You're telling me that at no time did you guys discuss that they had a wedding in Vegas the day before that? You would have asked them what they were doing in Vegas, and they would have told you they just got married. So where's the gray area? It should be a yes or no answer, not an I believe so. So Melani and Ian got married at the lucky little wedding chapel. She said it was intimate, quick, not anything crazy, but special to them. And then Alex and Zulema were just there as witnesses. It was last second. She said we didn't have time to invite a bunch of people, just like Lori and Chad. Melani tells us a little bit about her childhood as well. She says she was born in Utah, but lived in Phoenix as a baby, and then lived in California for a little while. Seattle is where she spent a lot of time growing up. She said her mom got really sick a couple years after having her, and she almost died during childbirth. She had a deep vein thrombosis blood clot, and Melani says that the Cox side doesn't have great genes. Her grandfather has had cancer and blood clots as well, and then her grandfather was told by the police that they thought Alex had died from a blood clot in the lung, and they knew it ran in the family, so it made sense to them. Melani's mom got really sick with type 1 diabetes and gastroparesis, which means she basically didn't have the ability to absorb nutrients from food she was eating into her body. So Melani's mom, Stacy, was in and out of hospitals, seeing doctors a lot, and Melani says that she knows it was hard on her dad and that there was infidelity on his part. Melani's parents tried to work through things, but they couldn't make it work, and so she spent a lot of time with her grandparents, Barry and Janice Cox, who lived in California, and she lived there for a while when her mom was sick. When her mom felt she was healthy enough, that's when they moved to Seattle, where her dad got a job, and it was just the three of them, since her mom couldn't have any more kids. Now, when she was 6, Melani claims her dad told her they were going to get gas, and they left her mom at home, and they just never went back. He took her credit cards, turned off the power, and just left her there when she was really sick and couldn't take care of herself. They hid out in a hotel for a couple of months, and then nasty custody battles ensued. Melani says her mom fought as much as she could, but she was sick, and she ran out of money, and there was nothing she could really do. When her dad got remarried, she allegedly heard a lot of terrible things about her mom and her mom's side of the family, and communication was cut off from them. She said she knew they were good people and the lies she was being told about them weren't right. When her mom passed away, when Melani was 9, Lori called her to tell her that her mom was in a coma and probably wasn't going to make it.
I've always loved and trusted Lori. She's always been somebody that is just so much unconditional love on her end, no judgment, no drama, and I admire her so much, and I don't think I would have wanted to have that phone call by anybody else to have to give me that news. And I remember flying up with my dad. He took me to see my mom last time in hospice. She was out, and she didn't come out of her diabetic coma. It wasn't a surprise. My mom was always very sick and on the line of, we don't know how long Stacy's going to last. And after age 9, and my mom passed, my dad didn't let me talk or see any of that side of the family. And I didn't know why, other than he was saying all sorts of things about them.
But Melani, who has mentioned this many times before, she never reveals exactly what it was that her father was saying about the Coxes. And I wonder why he didn't want Melani to see or talk to them. I wonder if there is something going on in that family that started before Lori. When Melani was 15, she found her Uncle Adam after Googling him, and, she says he was one of her favorite people growing up, so she started to reconnect, and she jumped right back into the relationship with them as if no time had passed at all. However, to her credit, Melani does admit that the case is heavy. She doesn't blame or judge people for thinking there's something odd going on, but then in other parts of the interview, she does seem to blame and judge people for thinking that there's something odd going on. And there has been some speculation about whether Melani's mother, Stacy, was one of Lori Vallow's first victims, and I've never believed that. But once again, with all the insane things going on in this case, I also don't blame people for wondering, at least. Okay, moving on to part 2 of the interview. Nate asks directly about JJ and Tylee, when is the last time you guys saw them? Melani responds that Ian has never met the kids, but the last time she saw them was when they were packing up their home in Chandler, where Charles had been shot.
Ian's never met
Yeah, I've never met him.
Tylee.
You've never seen them. Okay. What about you, Melani?
So the last time I saw them was they were packing up their home in Chandler where Charles had been shot. And I remember how emotional it was. Just, it's hard to be there. This is where this big thing happened, and Tylee was like, it's hard being here in this house after that situation happened. And Lori had, said, hey, I think she'd thrown out Ida, but I didn't know for sure because sometimes she's had to do things to protect her kids. The court systems haven't protected her, and Tylee and Colby were abused by their dad, Joe, and the court system didn't protect them there. And she's had this history of doing everything she can to protect Tylee and JJ, and I've always seen that in her since I was a teenager, and she flew me out to go nanny for Tylee and JJ. Like, I've never seen any evidence or anything at all that tells me that Lori would purposely harm her children or anything. And so it's hard, all the attacks being out there and seeing her. I still see her as the wonderful mom she is. When I see her come in court, I'm looking for something off that I'm not seeing, because I've had every fear of where could they be. But the last time I saw them was the end of August as they were moving, because I think they moved up that first week in September.
She remembered how emotional it was and that it was hard to be there, and Tylee told her, help me, it's hard being in this house after that. Melani says of Lori, sometimes she's had to do things to protect her kids. The court systems haven't protected her, and Tylee and Colby were abused by their dad, Joe. The court system didn't protect them, and she had this history of doing everything she could to protect JJ and Tylee. Nate asks Melani if she ever visited Lori in Rexburg before moving out there, and Melani responds, I did. I think on a weekend. My ex and I have 50-50 custody, so anytime it wasn't my time with the kids, I was a wreck and I just missed my kids. I tried to go hike in Arizona or go on a trip, and I did visit Lori for a weekend up there in Rexburg. She said, just come, try out somewhere new, and come see if you like it up here. We toured BYU, Idaho, and she said Tylee was with friends. She was always with friends, so I didn't ask any questions about that.
JJ's either doing some type of therapy or with a nanny or in a school that will help him. And so if I didn't see him, I wasn't like asking, where is he? And I've always trusted her. And I had known that they left to Idaho because they were being threatened by people. And I didn't want to ask so many questions, and I didn't know what to do with that. And I just was like there for love and support. What can I do for you? And you don't have to tell me. I just want to be there to help you guys.
Now, Melani plainly says that she visited Lori, and Lori told her that Tylee was with friends, which she wasn't. They'd literally just moved there. Melani comes to visit for a weekend and doesn't see either kid the whole weekend, and now we find that Lori lied to Melani about where Tylee was that weekend. But Melani still thinks there's nothing bizarre or strange going on, and she thinks it's a good idea to keep putting her faith in this woman and speaking out in support of her. Melani goes on to say that she knows they'd left Idaho because people were threatening them, so she didn't want to ask too many questions. She says she was just there for love and support of Lori, to help Lori, but this does directly contradict the statement she'd made previously in the same interview about being sad when she didn't have her kids with her, and Lori reaching out to her and saying, hey, come out and visit, check out this new place and see if you like it.
And so anytime I didn't have, wasn't my time with the kids, I was a wreck and just missed my kids. And so I'd try to go hike in Arizona or go on a trip. And I did go visit Lori for a weekend up there. And she said, you know, like, just come, you know, try out somewhere new, travel, and come see if you like it up here. And
So to me, it's like, which is it? Was Lori asking you to come out so she could help you feel better, or were you going out to help Lori feel better? Something else I noticed about Melani is she does a lot of talking before answering direct questions. I've noticed this several times. So she'll be asked like a really direct question, where are the kids? And she'll go into this whole just monologue about, well, the last time I saw them, they were packing up their home in Arizona, and then Tylee was crying and saying, help me, it's hard to be here, and then this, and this, instead of just saying the last time I saw them was when they were packing up their house. Very simple, right? But she goes into this huge just detail. And it does strike me as odd because when people are lying, they often do tend to go into a lot of detail because they're really trying hard to convince you that they're not lying. Additionally, a lot of these pretexts to answering direct questions are either propping herself up or propping Lori Vallow up. So she'll find a way to fit in to this pre-monologue before answering a question. How great of a mom Lori is, how horrible her ex-husband Brandon is, how mean he was to her, how terrible things happened to Lori from the Woodcocks, even though that wasn't the question that was asked. So Nate asks her if she thought it was suspicious or weird that the whole time she was there, she never saw the kids, even after she moved up the first week in November. And Melani said, well, you know, I was involved in setting up my new home, getting it ready for my kids. And she said Lori was very independent and doing her own thing. And yeah, I mean, she was right next door, but Melani spent most of her time with Alex, who'd helped her move to Rexburg on Halloween night. Alex would come over and hang out with her when she was having a hard day and missing her kids and lift her up. Lori was also still moving in and getting her stuff set up, so she was busy. 2 months later, apparently.
Lori's very independent. She's doing her own thing, and she was next door, but I spent most of my time with Alex. Alex was, he'd come over and hang out with me if I was having, most days were hard and teary with missing my kids, and he would kind of come over and lift me up. And so if I saw Lori, she was still moving in that process and getting situated there. And so I didn't spend a lot of time over there. I did see some of their things, and she had a room set up perfectly for Tylee and JJ, and it didn't seem strange to me. And I knew the threats that she was getting from Kay Woodcock and from others, and I guess I didn't ask questions because I knew that history. I knew what was going on. And I was in my own head, I'm trying to find out where my own kids are.
She's still setting her house up. And it didn't seem strange to her, to Melani at least, that she didn't see the kids. Melani says that she knew Lori was getting threats from Kay Woodcock. And because she knew the situation and what was going on, she didn't ask questions. So Nate goes on and he's like, yeah, maybe a few days, I understand. But when it's been like weeks and you're physically seeing Lori, did the topic of kids ever come up?
There's going to be people that say, you know, when we get together with relatives, the talk instantly turns to our kids, soccer games, piano recitals, whatever, that, you know, you can't, there's not a lot else to talk about, you know, other than family. So when you actually would see her, did that sort of conversation ever come up of, you know, I could maybe understand a day or two, but if you're going on weeks and you haven't seen him, like, oh, hey, where's JJ been? Especially because he has special needs.
Melani responds, once again in her circular way of talking, sort of trying to paint Lori as a good person, good mother, before even answering every question.
Right, yeah, and so she would tell me things like, one of the neighbor boys next door, I forget his name, but she would tell me all his friends and how funny they were, and some people were a little bit, JJ was very high energy, and sometimes he'd be in other people's space, and I think sometimes that bothered some other people. So she would say, well, these are the friends that are just, you know, not judgmental, and they'll just let JJ come in. And she said that he loved his school there. We did. She always talks about her children, but just during that time, I guess, from November to, I guess the 20th is about when Ian and I started dating. I didn't see them, but I didn't see a lot of Lori. I saw Alex pretty much every day, and anytime I guess would go over, like, what's Tylee doing? Oh, she's out with friends, and you know, we're doing everything we can to protect the kids from Kay. Kay's causing a lot of trouble right now, and really get into too much of what their own custody deal with that was. But to be honest, I'm in my own head and don't know where my own kids are at this point. And as we know, later in November is when I went down to Utah to try to see, what we could work out and where they were at.
So after Ian and Melani got married, they both kept their apartments since they both had leases. They would sleep at her apartment, and she set up stuff for his kids at her apartment where she had an extra bedroom. And then Nate Eaton asks, when did you guys find out there was an investigation that JJ and Tylee were missing? Now, Melani says she's foggy on the dates, but the detectives came to her door while she was still moving, so it must have been the first or second week of November. She gets a knock on her door, sees the police, and immediately she thinks about what's Brandon done now, That's where her head immediately goes. My ex-husband is after me. That's why she didn't want Ian to give her full name to his ex-wife, Natalie, because then maybe Brandon would find her and harass her. So you're leading me to believe that Brandon doesn't know you've moved to Rexburg. He doesn't know where you're living. You guys share children together, 4 children, and he has no idea where you are. And this is your way of getting custody of your kids back by running away from where your kids live, living someplace else, and then not telling your husband or your kids where you are?
So I'm foggy on this date, but Detective Aramacio and another gentleman had come by to my door while I was moving my stuff in. So this had to have been early in November, I think, probably the second week in November. And I get a knock at the door and I open it and see police, and I'm like, jumpy because, what's my ex up to? What's the next thing? I don't know where my kids are. Are my kids okay?
So she's always throwing stuff at Brandon, blaming Brandon for everything. And then the police officer asked, do you know who lives next door? And I have to play this clip because she never directly answers.
And he just asked, he said, hey, do you know who lives next door? And I said, yeah, it's, I think Alex's name was on the lease. So sometimes my uncle's over there, sometimes my aunt goes over there, and just, openly. And I didn't know what that was about. And that was it. That was my first encounter with Rexburg police, I guess.
But apparently this is when they told her the kids were missing. And then another contradiction. Ian says he went to Arizona to spend Thanksgiving with his family, and then Melani drove to Arizona a few days later, and she had called him, and that's when she mentioned she had no one to spend Thanksgiving with, so he suggested she spend it with him.
And she came down a few days later, and on her way down, she was talking about how she didn't have anybody to go to Thanksgiving with, and so I invited her to come be with my family. It was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing.
But she says she was driving to Arizona to spend Thanksgiving with his family. Like she'd been invited to do that before, and that was her main goal for driving to Arizona, where he made it sound like she was driving to Arizona to do her own thing or see her own family. And then she told him as she was driving up, like, oh, I don't actually have anyone to spend Thanksgiving with. And then he was like, oh, you should spend it with my family.
Right before Thanksgiving, we were driving down to Arizona. Ian was already there, and I was driving down to meet his family and have Thanksgiving with his family. And
so once again, it's like, I'm not quite sure. These are little things, I know, but they are a sign that someone is lying, someone who doesn't have their story straight. And when someone doesn't have their story straight, you have to wonder why, because what happened. And if you can't keep the facts and the timeline straight, it's because you aren't being honest about everything. So she's driving to Arizona. She gets a text from a police officer saying someone had broken into her apartment, and she had to call him right away. So once again, she immediately thought that her ex, Brandon, had sent someone to break into her home, even though, technically, right, he doesn't know where you live because you didn't want Natalie, Ian's ex-wife, to know your full name, because then Brandon might be able to find you. But this was before Natalie knew your full name.
I get a text from Lieutenant Ball that says, somebody's broken into your home. I need you to call me right away. And I'm immediately like, oh, great. My ex has sent somebody. I knew he had a private investigator following me. And I immediately think like he sent somebody to come break into my home. That was my first thought. And I didn't know what to text back. I was kind of processing. And then later
and somehow you think Brandon found you and broke into your house. But why is she so paranoid about Brandon? Why every time something happens, she immediately thinks he's responsible? So she texted the police officer back and she said, I'm with people I love on Thanksgiving. At least that's what's important. Whatever the heck was taken, I had my emergency cash savings in a computer, iPad, an old phone I didn't use. I didn't know what had been taken, but if my whole apartment had been robbed, I have everything I need. It's not about things.
Later I texted back and I said, well, I'm with, people people I love on Thanksgiving, and at least that's what's important. If whatever the heck was taken, I had my emergency cash savings, and I had, just a computer, an iPad, an old phone I didn't use. Like, I didn't know what had been taken, but I was like, if my whole apartment is robbed, it's okay. I got everything I need. It's not about things. And then he said, I need you to call me. And then later found out that it was the Rexburg police. They had knocked down my door, and they had taken a lot of my things.
Later, she found out that it had been the Rexburg PD who had broken into her house and taken some of her things. And when she got back after Thanksgiving, before she went to Vegas to get married after 2 weeks of knowing a guy, she spoke with the detectives and got her stuff back. And she was asked about Lori and Chad, about what Melani was doing in Rexburg, etc. She said Lori and Chad had left about the same time Melani was driving to Arizona for Thanksgiving, and she thinks it was a planned move. She says it wasn't last minute because they'd been talking about moving to Hawaii at some point. And Nate asks her, do you see how that looks suspicious though? Like, the day after police come to Lori's house to do a welfare check on her missing children, they leave and go to Hawaii?
Can you see how that looks suspicious though? The timing of them.
How it looks suspicious?
Right in the middle of all of this.
Absolutely, everything looks suspicious. I knew that they had planned to move then, and I didn't know exactly when they were going to move. And so many things don't look suspicious, of course. And I think having some basis of knowledge on, what people had already planned and what's actually going on, it kind of makes it less suspicious to me, I guess.
And Melani responds, absolutely, everything looks suspicious. And I don't know if she means everything in life or everything in this case, because no, everything doesn't normally look suspicious for normal people in normal everyday life. But Melani thinks that knowing there was a plan makes it seem less suspicious to her. So Nate asks, where do you think JJ and Tylee are? And she responds, I don't know, I've been asked that so many times. And as we know, I've had every fear in the world of what could have happened to them. I think most of December, after Lori and Chad just disappeared and I didn't have a phone number for them and no contact, I'm thinking the worst.
After Lori and Chad just disappeared and I didn't have a phone number for them and no contact, I am thinking the worst, because I get a phone call from one of Lori's old friends, and she scares me with a lot of, I think this happened or this could have happened, and I'm having every what if. Because I'm like, yeah, I didn't see them the whole time I was up there in November, but I also know and had seen, text messages from Kay and how she was treating Lori after Charles passed away. And I also knew who Lori was, though, and Lori's always been somebody with a plan. She's always done everything to protect her kids.
Okay, once again, contradictions. It was planned for a while that Lori and Chad were going to move to Hawaii. But then you make it seem like they just up and left, disappeared, leaving behind no phone number or way to contact them. When someone plans to move to a different state, they don't just vanish without telling their family member who also happens to live next door. They don't leave you with no phone number or a way to contact them. They were hiding, and she's proved that right now by saying Lori and Chad just vanished and she had no way to contact them. And then she says Lori always has a plan, and she does anything to protect her children. Once again, not helping your case. If Lori's gone off the deep end and thinks her children are zombies, to her, protecting them might be ending their lives. And yes, she always has a plan, but that doesn't necessarily mean she always has a good or legal plan. It just means she's calculated. Now here, Melani tries to do damage control, trying to explain why Ian would have wrote those terrifying things in that document found on his computer. A document he later explains was written for Melani's lawyer to document his cooperation with the FBI.
So the whole purpose of the document was to send to Melanie's lawyers so that they knew what I had gone in and told the FBI. So I told Melanie, it was December 19th, I think, that I'd been talking with the police, and a little later I told her I'd been recording her. And when I wrote that document, the whole purpose was, it was after I told Melanie I'd been working with the FBI and the police that I wrote this. The whole idea is to protect her. Her lawyers need to know exactly what I said, how I said it. And that's how I wanted to present it to them, is these are the fears that I shared with them, that Melanie had shared with me, and in that document, I mean, it sounds a lot more affirmative than what I heard. But when I go into the police, I want action. I want this to be over with, basically. So my whole purpose is I went and I shared with the FBI everything that I heard, everything I was afraid of. I think, at that point, I thought the kids were in danger. I thought there was something, dark and sinister going on. I was afraid. And so things came out when I talked with the FBI in a way that they shouldn't have. And I kind of regret the way I presented it to them, because I feel like it's kind of blown this thing up a lot more than it should have.
She said she was so stressed out because everyone was speculating, so she dumped it on him. If she had a bad dream, she'd wake up and tell him. If she had a crazy thought, she would tell him. She didn't actually believe these things, okay, guys? She'd just been pumped up by all of these alarmists out here, and she was venting to her husband. So Ian says the whole purpose of the document was to send to Melani's lawyers so they had known what he'd done and what he told the FBI. So things came out when he talked with the FBI in a way that he shouldn't have said them, and he kind of regrets the way he presented them. Because he feels like it's blown this whole thing up a lot more than it should have been. He said, quote, "There wasn't really a lot going on until my ex-wife and I went in and spoke to the FBI, and then a week later they're starting to put out press releases and all these things. I don't know if what we shared was a catalyst for that, or if I'm just full of myself."
I don't know if what we shared acted as a catalyst for that, or if, maybe I'm just full of myself.
I get what Ian means about his sarcastic sense of humor not translating well via text. So Nate asks him, there's some scary stuff in there.
Well, but for the casual reader seeing this, there is some shocking stuff in there. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Chad and Lori apparently told you, Melanie, that JJ and Tylee had been possessed and become zombies, that Alex may have to take care of the kids. Great faith, never wavered in his trust of the Lord. Ian, can you understand that these writings are alarming, concerning, suspicious on all counts?
Yeah, I can absolutely see, anybody who doesn't know what's going on, they're going to look at this and go, yeah, this is insane. And at the time I wrote this is something where Brandon and my ex-wife, Natalie. So Brandon contacted my ex-wife, Natalie.
Anyone who doesn't know what's going on, they're going to think this is insane. This was a time where Brandon contacted my ex-wife, Natalie, and basically shared the idea with her that Melanie's in a cult. Lori's in a cult. Chad's in a cult. They tried to kill me. They killed Charles. There's this whole plot, and Ian was thinking, holy crap, what did he get himself into? He claims anything that happened, anything he heard from then on, even if it's something he'd heard before, he was looking at it through the lens of this could be a cult. Something weird is going on. And he's hearing this right after Melanie's door gets kicked in by the Rexburg police with a warrant looking for JJ. Depending on how you shine the light on the facts, they look different.
And so, I've kind of described it in the past as, like you see a Treehouse of Horrors episode of The Simpsons for Halloween, and you see a dark, a claw, shadow of a claw up on the wall, and then the light comes on, you see it's just a branch scratching on your window. I guess, depending on how you shine the light, there are facts, but then depending on how you shine the flashlight on, the facts look different. And so the way I'm looking at it when I'm hearing all these things is I'm scared. There's a cult, there's all this going on. And as I looked at it, as you go through the document, you kind of see my thought process of, this is stuff that I'm hearing, this is stuff I'm worried about. And as I continue to look at it, I'm starting to see that there's really nothing proving any of this.
So the way Ian was looking at it when he was hearing all these things, he thought, I'm scared. There's a cult. All of this is going on. But as he continues looking at it, he's starting to see that there's really nothing proving any of this. There's nothing proving Tylee and JJ have come to any harm, aside from the fact that you can see at the end of the document, I'm still questioning why in the world do we not know where the kids are. He says he's gotten to know Summer, Lori's sister, and Janice, Lori's mother, and heard about Lori's life and the things she's gone through. He started to see maybe there's a reason for what's going on, even though he has no idea what's going on. But he loves Melanie, and he knows she's a good person. Melanie then talks about how Lori found out Charles was cheating on her. Charles Vela was cheating on her, and Lori figured this out from purchases on his computer, texts, etc. And he was on the road all the time for his job. Lori confronted Charles, and he flipped. Melanie claims that Charles had never said a bad word about Lori. He thought the world of her, and as soon as she started asking questions, he flipped. He came over to Melanie and Brandon's house. They were still married at this time, and he told them that Lori was crazy, and he'd found things on her computer, including that dark and light spirit rating that Chad Daybell sent her.
Charles and Lori, things just went quick. She had found a lot of women on his computer and a lot of purchases and stuff that he had been, purchasing through, I think it's Hollywood Hobbies or something, I can't remember. And she's upset, obviously, and he's somebody that's on the road all the time for his career, similar to what Brandon does for his work. And she found this and, kind of confronted him with it, what is this? And Charles had never said an ill thing about Lori ever, just thought the world of her, just worshipped her. And as soon as she just started asking questions, he flipped.
And Melani says all the things Charles were saying were just off because Lori had kept Charles' infidelity to herself. She hadn't told her family, she hadn't spread it around, she was trying to deal with it. But then Charles went crazy and started emailing everyone, telling them Lori was crazy. He took JJ away, and he was spreading his beliefs about Lori being crazy around. And then Melani says something interesting. She says, patterns of narcissism.
And it's these patterns of narcissism where everything's fine until you start asking questions.
And then she compares it to her own experience with her ex-husband, Brandon. She says, everything is fine until you start asking questions. I saw the exact same pattern with my ex-husband. Everything was fine. He thought the world of me until I asked some questions he was uncomfortable answering.
I mean, I didn't see the same exact pattern happen with my ex-husband. Everything was fine. He thought the world of me until I asked some questions he was uncomfortable answering. And instead of saying, hey, these things, here's an explanation for this, he turned on me and he said, Melanie, I'm going to take the kids away from you. You're crazy. I'm going to get you excommunicated from the church, and you're never going to see your kids again. And that's just from asking, hey, what's this video I found, right? What are these text messages? And so many things. And I don't know, it was like watching Charles unravel first, then Brandon did the same exact thing, and then it's just these patterns, and I'm like, you just can't make this stuff up. It's the same exact thing happening over and over again. And
I mean, you can make this stuff up. Many fiction writers have made this stuff up, and what kind of stuff keeps happening over and over again? Is what's happening over and over again the men in the lives of Melani and Lori keep turning into zombies and they have to be taken out for their own good? Is that what keeps happening over and over again? The people around you all seem to coincidentally be occupied by zombies, including detectives that are working on the case. So she's blaming all of this, all of what happened with Lori running away, taking the kids and hiding them, allegedly. She's blaming it all on Charles Vallow, her ex-husband Brandon, the Woodcocks who were threatening Lori. It's everyone else's fault but Lori's. And all she did was spirit the kids away from all of these people who mean to do Lori and her family harm. Now, I have no doubt that Kay Woodcock may have sent Lori some choice text messages, but if my brother had been shot to death by his wife's brother, and I knew my brother didn't have a temper, and I knew my brother wasn't the kind of person who's just going to hit someone over the head with a baseball bat, I would be angry too, and I would send some pretty mean text messages. But Melani says she absolutely believes Alex shot Charles in self-defense. And her biggest reason for believing that was Tylee, who was always collected and mature about things. And this situation was no different.
Lori had something planned, or Alex did, but there's no doubt in my mind about that shooting. Brandon went and ran with that story to his advantage. He pulled me into the garage, and he and my Uncle Adam said, Charles has been murdered by Alex.
She was incredibly brave while talking about it. She explained everything. So did Lori, and so did Alex, and it made sense with how Charles had been acting. She was just shocked it went to that extreme. Melani says she's glad Alex was there to protect Tylee. And she says this specifically, not to protect Lori or JJ, to protect Tylee.
But I'm glad Alex was there to protect Tylee, because that's the only, Lori and Charles were arguing, but the only time Alex said, hey, I'm going to get involved in this is when, he had a baseball bat and was, I don't know. With Tylee, I don't know if he was going to hit her. Tylee made it sound like he was probably going to hit her and kind of taking the bat away. And I hated that Tylee had to go through that. And
why would Alex have to protect Tylee from Charles, a man who had always treated her with respect and love, who never rated her as a dark spirit? Are we really supposed to believe that a grown man who had basically raised Tylee, who had kids of his own, would hit a 17-year-old girl with a baseball bat? He was mad at Lori, not Tylee. What is this woman talking about? Melani claims that Tylee made it sound like Charles was going to kind of hit her. What a convenient statement to make. Did Tylee tell anyone else or the police that she thought Charles was going to hit her with a baseball bat? Too bad we can't ask her, because she's gone. We don't know where she is. As to how Lori acted afterwards, after Charles's death, Melani has an explanation for that too. Lori was upset. She was in shock.
I know there's been a lot of criticism of how Lori acted afterwards, and how she's smiling on camera. And I know Lori, and when she's uncomfortable, she kind of, or in shock, she'll just kind of laugh or smile, try to make light of it. And I do the same thing. That's just something, how we handle being in shock, and every person handles being in shock differently.
And when she's upset or in shock, she tries to make light of things. Melani does the same thing, and everyone handles being in shock differently, except for Melani and Lori, who apparently handle being in shock exactly the same way. Melani's claiming that all this cult stuff and spirits and evil demons and translated beings, Charles is putting this stuff in the divorce documents, but she's never heard Lori say this. That's just a lie. We know this from the document Ian wrote, the one he wrote after trying to get information about Lori and Chad and their group from his new wife, Melani. All the stuff about translated beings, evil spirits, zombies. Melani told Ian that she'd heard these things from Chad and Lori, but now she's never heard any of these crazy ideas before. Now Melani claims that it wasn't Chad and Lori who told her all this stuff. It was a friend of Lori's, an unnamed friend, by the way. Who is this friend who told her all this stuff?
I see everything that Charles did, and it looks as if he was setting up. As soon as Lori caught on to what he had done, like the emails about his life insurance, Charles sold life insurance and had his own company. I mean, the texts between people, it almost looked like a setup. It was very alarming to see all these things. Fear, I guess, where it comes down to Tylee and JJ, and this zombie idea came from a disturbing phone call I got from one of Lori's old friends right after they took off to Hawaii, and telling me these things. Well, Lori and Alex, I think, did something to Tylee and JJ, and we don't know where they're at, and Lori's lied to you, and all these things that didn't feel right. That phone call, I just felt a lot of fear and doubt, and that's when I kind of went into this worrying phase of, and I'm newly married to Ian, and I'm sharing these things with him, and can't sleep at night some nights. And I'm like, I don't know where they're at. I don't know what's going on, and I don't understand these things. And Ian, which I don't know, is talking with Natalie and Brandon, and they're telling him these terrifying things that aren't true, that I've plotted to kill Brandon, and I'm in a cult. And so I have no idea that what Ian's doing behind the scenes, and I'm in a scared time in my life where I'm trying to figure out the pieces. I'm trying to just even know what's going on with Brandon and his plans.
But why did she tell Ian it was Lori and Chad who told her? And she said she never believed them. But of course, she was afraid, even though she never believed them, she was afraid enough to tell Ian that she thought those kids were in danger, that she thought maybe Alex had taken a shot at her ex-husband, that she said Chad and Lori told her that Brandon was inhabited by an evil spirit and he had to go. Melani also says that she warned Ian in advance that his ex-wife Natalie was going to get a hold of Brandon, and Brandon was going to say all of these lies about her. Now, this is a T. Stout move. Melani knew her secrets would come out sooner or later, so instead of letting her new husband Ian find out organically and then explain, she preemptively started structuring this narrative to Ian. Brandon is a liar. He's off the rails. He's a narcissistic person, and if you or anyone you know ever talks to him, he's going to say all these lies about me. But remember, they're lies, because I said they were lies, so they're lies. Looks like Lori isn't the only one who always has a plan. Now, on the topic of the attempted shooting of her ex-husband Brandon, Melani says she initially thought it could have been Alex, but now she's not even sure if the shooting happened. She says Brandon called her on Christmas and berated her for an hour and told her that she needed to tell the FBI that it was Alex who shot him or she'd never see her kids again. According to Melani, Brandon even got her dad on board, and he was texting her, urging her to come clean and cooperate with the officials. It's not all of these people, Melani, who are just getting on board with this adverse idea. All these people don't have some conspiracy against you. They're not trying to gang up and take you down. These are your family members, people who love and care about you, who know that you're associating with dangerous people. They're trying to help you. Now, I don't think Brandon was threatening her with her kids to tell a lie to the FBI. I don't think he was trying to say, if you don't go along with my narrative and tell the FBI that it was Alex who shot at me, I'm not going to let you see your kids. I think he was letting her know that until she made a show of good faith and that she was cooperating with law enforcement and she wasn't on board with whatever it was Lori and Chad and Alex were into, he didn't feel safe letting her see her kids. But of course, she perceived this as a threat, as almost blackmail. Now, when Melani is asked if she thinks Brandon is dark, she goes off on another tangent.
Do you believe that Brandon has turned dark?
No, and that's in that document, the terminology, the way I understand this is in our faith, you have, as you increase in becoming closer to your Savior and act on obedience and righteousness, you increase in light. And as you, make bad decisions or, invite evil things into your life, you're losing that light of Christ.
But then she says she doesn't see children as being light or dark. They believe that by the age of 8, that's the age of accountability. When you're baptized, from then on, you can make decisions in the light or dark arena. At the age of 8, you're still a child. How can a child of 8 make a dark decision or make a pact with the dark side? How can these people even believe that a child that's of the age of 8 has an understanding of what good and evil is to the point where they can start coloring their decisions as light and dark? At one point, the lawyer with Ian and Melani mutes their sound right after she goes on the light-dark tangent and starts talking about a cult, and he says something to her which she nods, and it looks like she's saying, I know. Then she comes back and she says, this isn't a cult.
You said earlier, Melanie, that you're not in a cult, but are you in a fringe group? Are you in a group that's not mainstream? Were Lori and Chad in a group that's not mainstream?
Hang on 1 second. You got it.
Can you hear me okay, Nate?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I'm not in any cult, and I don't believe any radical beliefs off of the, I believe it. Can you still see us?
You're there.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. I don't believe in anything that is against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And she's told all of this would die down if Lori would just tell us where the kids are. Why do you think she won't? And Melani says, I don't have the answer to that. But Lori knows no one is listening to her. She has been proven guilty before even being given the chance to speak for herself. Melani, she has had the chance to speak for herself. She says no comment. We've seen many times reporters approach her on the streets in Kauai, like, where are your kids? She says no comment. She's in court now. She has the opportunity to speak to her lawyers, to the judge, to anybody who's going to listen and make a deal to get her ass out of there and get her kids home, right? But she's not talking. Melani says that she believes 100% that Lori knows what she's doing, and she also believes that Lori knows where the kids are. She says, quote, I believe when all this speculation and rumors are over and we're looking at the facts, Lori's going to have a story to tell. She is in jail waiting for her time to tell her story. And then Nate Eaton asks her, well, can't you just ask her where the kids are? And Melani says, no, I can't ask her where the kids are because she's in jail and everything is recorded. And Melani doesn't think that if she asked Lori, she would even tell her, in order to not involve her, in order to not involve Melani in this whole thing. Melani said, I trust her. She's always got a plan. When it comes down to it, every fear and worry, every doubt that I have, it doesn't stick to the knowledge I do know of who Lori is and everything she's done to protect those kids. Those kids love their mom. They don't want to be with Kay. JJ never wanted to be with Kay. Melani claims Kay and Larry weren't even a big part of JJ's life, and she sees Kay's aggression. She sees a lot of things behind the scenes that aren't being said. Why aren't they being said? If you're going to make allegations that Kay was threatening Lori, if you're going to make allegations that Lori has done all of this because of the threats she's received from the Woodcocks, you got to back it up with some evidence. Melani's asked, do you think they're safe in a bunker somewhere? And then the lawyer stops, right? He stops them.
We don't know what that means, but do you think they're safe? Do you think they're in a bunker somewhere or?
Yeah, Nate, let me modify this just a little bit. Part of the premise of what our clients are saying, and of course includes Melanie and who are sitting here with us, but also Summer and Janice. The premise of it is first and foremost, they don't think they've ever seen anything in Lori's life that would give them any evidence that she could harm her children. And so that's base one. The next level is that they know that Lori had a basis and a belief that she needed to take steps to protect her kids. We don't have all the details about that, but she had expressed at least that much to them. They were moving out of the state of Arizona. They were going away. She had a reason for doing that. The third thing on this is that they had experienced in Lori's life this notion that she has a substantial distrust of the system because of its failure in her ability to protect her own kids. The system never was able to help her do that, the judicial system I'm speaking of. And so it's hard to go into Lori and say, well, just tell us where the kids are, when it undermines everything that I just set forward. They don't think she did anything to the kids. They know she's got a basis for wanting to protect them. They know that she doesn't trust the system. And so to go in and ask her if she were to tell them where the kids are, it would undermine her ultimate purpose, which is to protect the kids. I don't think the question, I mean, everybody wants that question asked because they just want to see where the kids are. But that's not what Lori's goal is here. I think Lori's goal is to protect them. And saying where they are doesn't protect them in her mind.
So the lawyer's saying, look, we know Lori is a good mom and loves her kids. We know that she doesn't trust the system. We know she's been going through some stuff. So if her ultimate goal is to protect them, then they can't go and ask her where they are, because telling Melani where the kids are would be not protecting them. And I just don't get this. What's going to honestly happen if she says where the kids are? Is she worried that if JJ and Tylee were with Kay and Larry Woodcock that they would be unsafe in a way? Why have you not said this to anybody? I mean, okay, law enforcement hasn't listened to you. They haven't helped you in the past, whatever. New day, new dawn. Now you have the world's eyes on you. Every law enforcement official in the world is like, what's happening with this? You have the attention of everyone, but you're still not talking. We're all listening. You're still not talking, Lori. So this doesn't make any sense to me. Because Melani goes on to say the bigger question should be, why does Lori feel the need to protect her kids? From who? From what? And until we know that question, she says until we know that question, not that answer, she will probably not tell any of us. She's willing to sit in jail over keeping quiet and not sharing that information with us. So it does seem like they're trying to build the narrative that the Woodcocks, Kay especially, are the ones who are the dangerous people who the kids need to be protected from. And Melani says Lori has a plan at least half a dozen times. She says her and Ian's kids have been kept from them because of the situation. Does it seem like Melani might have a reason to make everything seem normal? And I mean, I feel for her. I feel that having your children taken from you or not being able to see them would be the absolute worst thing that could ever happen to me. I don't feel like I could ever recover from that. However, does it not seem that Melani might have an interest in making this whole situation seem as safe and wholesome as possible so that she can get her kids back? If everything's okay, if Melani can convince everyone there's no cult, there's no murders, we're all just doing our own thing, everything's fine, she has a better chance of getting her kids back, right? Now, Ian says Brandon and Natalie are using this to their advantage to keep their kids away from them. Remember, it's always everyone else's fault, never theirs. It's not that you, Melani, aligned yourself with some crazy-ass people. It's not that you, Ian, married a woman mixed up with some crazy-ass people 2 weeks after meeting her, knowing nothing about her past or who she actually is, because you can't know who someone is after knowing them for 2 weeks. Like I said, I do feel for them. It's awful. And the person they should be begging for answers to help them clear this whole thing up is Lori. Why are they sitting in front of a camera, begging all of us to believe something that is unbelievable, when they should be demanding Lori to produce the kids alive and well? That way there is clear evidence that nothing crazy is going on, and they can be reunited with their own kids. As for Ian, I do believe he should have trusted his gut instinct when he first heard about all this stuff going on with Melani. I think he's going to be okay, as long as he doesn't ask too many questions or list Melani as the beneficiary on his life insurance. What does disturb me a bit is in these interviews, Melani appears to be with child. And although babies are happy occasions, I feel like in this situation, adding another soul, another life, another person to this incredibly backwards, upside down case is just going to complicate things more. Ian says that he hopes there's a happy ending because it's going to be a dark shadow over his and Melani's life if there isn't. Yeah, I guess there should be a happy ending, but it's not really you and Melani I'm worried about the happy ending being for. JJ and Tylee are the ones who need a happy ending. I just can't imagine a world where a teenage girl would be okay with being kept away in some bunker with her little brother, no cell phone, no internet. I mean, there's a pandemic going on right now. Who's taking care of them? Who's making sure they have food? Who's watching them? Are they locked in? If they are alive and they've been stowed away someplace, are they locked in so they can't get out? this is bad. This is all bad. Is someone following Chad Daybell? Like, does he have a tail on him? Are the police following him, keeping track of him? Do they put a tracker on his car or something so they can see where he's going? Maybe he's going and bringing them food or, keeping them company. None of it makes sense. Now, I guess what I want to ask myself and you guys, do we think Melani knows more than she's letting on? I think she does. I don't necessarily think she knows where the kids are, but all this stuff like, oh, I didn't believe any of this stuff about demons and dark and light and translated beings and teleportation. I didn't believe that stuff. I just, thought it might be possible. And then I was worried and stressed out. And of course, all these people are putting this stuff in my head. I don't believe that she didn't believe it. I think she did believe it. I think she does believe it. And I think in a way she is in a cult because she's still protecting Lori Vallow, even though there's 2 children's lives that hang in the balance. When you mindlessly do something, when you trust someone to that extent as she trusts Lori, and she says this over and over again. It's not me. I'm not putting words in her mouth. I trust her. I believe she has a plan. I trust her. I know she knows what she's doing. She's a great mother. I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise. The fact that her kids are missing might be something to suggest otherwise. But according to Melani, everything's A-okay with Lori Vallow. And that is the sign of someone who has been brainwashed and is in a cult. All the people who were in Manson's cult, for instance, they didn't think he was crazy. They didn't think all his stories about this underground city where you would grow fairy wings and then you would live forever and come out when the apocalypse happened and rule the world after. They didn't think that was crazy. They didn't think it was crazy. And when somebody would say to them, that's crazy, they'd be like, no. Charlie's great. He's a good person. I trust him. He has a plan. I believe everything he says. Melani is sounding a lot like Charles Manson's followers right now. Whenever you are in a cult or a group like this, while you're in the thick of it, you can't see when something is wrong or off because you have been manipulated. So I do think that Ian and Melani have an ulterior motive, and it might not be why they're saying these things, but it could be a reason why they are trying to make everything seem as calm and normal as possible. And Ian saying like, oh no, I wrote that stuff, but I was looking at it through a different lens. It was looking at it through the lens of this could be a cult. And if you don't look at it through that lens, it doesn't look that crazy. There's a reason why Melani is like, no guys, trust me. This was all blown out of proportion. Everything I said that I was afraid that Alex might have to take the kids out because they're zombies, it was crazy. It was just a dream. And then I got worried and I was just, venting. This is normal stuff you vent to your husband about. No, it's not. It's not normal. The fact that you were afraid of that, the fact that you even suspected it could be true, that there was even a sliver of doubt in you, that says everything to me, especially considering this man was like your best friend and he was, this intellectual person you could talk to about anything. The fact that you thought, knowing him well enough, that there was a possibility he might have done that, it says everything. And you see very much of the same in the interview with Lori Vallow's mother and sister. So it says Morgan Lowe sat down with the mother and sister of Lori Vallow to talk about where her 2 kids are. And this interview with these 2 women, it leads me to believe that the entire family has some issues with reality. As this man, Morgan Lowe, is talking to them, and he's very solemn, and he's like, these 2 kids, all she has to do is show proof that they're alive and okay. These women, Lori's mother and sister, are just nodding and smirking. Like it's funny. Like it's the funniest thing in the world. Like it's some inside joke that only they know. And everyone else in the world isn't in on it. And that's hilarious to them. And Janice Cox, Lori's mother, says, it seems simple. It seems simple to me. And then he asks her sister, Summer, have you asked Lori where the kids are? And Summer says, no. What? I put myself in these people's shoes every time. I always do. If it was my sister, her kids were missing, had been for the better part of a year, would I go and talk to her and not ask her, where are your kids, my nieces, my nephews, where are they? Are they safe? She just straight out comes out and is like, nope, didn't ask. All Lori had to say to Summer was, you know me, I've always taken care of my kids, I love my kids. Enough said. Nothing else needs to be asked. Just trust me. So Lori's mother and sister don't believe Lori had anything to do with the death of Charles Vallow, who was shot by Alex, her brother, their brother and son. And they don't think she had anything to do with the death of Tammy Daybell. And so the reporter asks, are you defending her because she's your sister and your daughter? Or are you defending her because you truly believe she didn't do anything wrong? And they were like, no, we truly believe she didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, she's made some bad judgment calls. But in this situation, I don't think she had anything to do with these people dropping dead around her. And once again, The decisions that Lori have made that have been questionable is not anything personally she decided to do, but it was the men she decided to marry. So in effect, we're not blaming Lori for what happened in her marriages. We're blaming the fact that she married the wrong men. So it's their fault. It's their fault for being the wrong men. It's their fault for not treating her the way she deserved or not being liked, by her family, because her mom was like, oh, she's married some men we didn't care for. And then Summer, Lori's sister, is like, she'll be the first one to tell you that she's had these marriages, that she's chosen marriages that weren't the best. And she's had to pay a high price for that. The biggest thing here to take away from this interview is these women are never going to say anything against Lori. And that's the question that I want to know. Why? Why? If you see something that's clearly disturbing, why don't you question it? Additionally, they say they don't believe anything happened to the kids because they know Lori and they don't believe she would do anything to hurt the kids. And that's all they need. And get this, Lori's mother claims she's talked to JJ since he's been missing. So this article from the Deseret News says Lori Vallow Daybell's mother has given her first official interview about the case of Lori Vallow and her missing Idaho children, revealing she spoke with JJ Vallow after he reportedly disappeared. When asked, what the conversation was, she literally says, I talked to him. He just takes the phone, and he knows, he knows who we are. She doesn't say what he said. She doesn't say what she said. She doesn't say anything, really, anything at all, which is a kind of a pattern here with her and Melani and this whole Lori Cox family. Lori Vallow's mother says, quote, she's invested her whole life in those children. So we know there's another whole side to this. We don't know what it is, but we know her. I'm positive beyond any doubt that she hasn't harmed those kids. Now, apparently, Janice Cox sent CBS News a phone bill that showed the alleged call took place. I don't know how she could have a phone bill that showed that. Like, what number did it come from? Where is he? Could have been a phone call from anybody. So you hear a lot of this repeated in the interview with Summer and Janice, in the interview with Melani and Ian. No, we haven't asked her. She's in jail. Everything's recorded. She's not going to tell us. We don't even bother asking. Everything's fine. We trust her. She knows what she's doing. You hear this repeated a lot. And yeah, it does sound like something you'd say if you were in a cult and you were defending your cult leader. I'm not saying that Summer and Janice are in a cult. I don't know their deal because they just kind of popped in out of nowhere. I don't know their deal yet. But it does sound like the kinds of things people who follow a cult leader would say, trusting blindly in them just because they know them. I know Lori. She would never do that. That's it. There's no other concern here. And that's a big issue because if somebody has developed some sort of mental issue, a temporary insanity, any kind of psychiatric condition that could technically happen out of nowhere, you wouldn't have to show a history of that. You're still trusting her even though you don't know what her mental state is like, even though you don't know if she's gone off the deep end. You don't know if this Lori is the same Lori you've known your whole life. So that's where I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to pass the question off to you. What do you think about this whole case? This case that continues to evolve, and the things that come out aren't really supporting any kind of narrative that JJ and Tylee are all right out there somewhere. So why are all these people continuing to kind of band around Lori and defend her? If I were Melani, if I were Ian, if I were Summer and Janice, I'd pick a different hill to die on at this point. I'd hitch my wagon to a different horse because this one doesn't seem to be going anywhere good. Thanks for bearing with me through this long 3-part series, but I just kind of wanted to shove everything new that I've come to find into, one place instead of continuing to do updates as things come out. And I think it's better that way. It gives us a better overview of what's happening. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, stay home, and I will see you very soon. Bye.